Hello, minions, and welcome to another episode of Designer Discussion. We've got the lead designer for Everyday Heroes with us today. Super excited. We got Sig. Hey, how you doing
Hi,
today,
everybody.
man?
I'm doing pretty good. Still early morning for me, which is weird, but it's like 10:40. But I have strange hours, so there you go.
Time zones are a mess. I'm in noon 30, so I'm just about ready to eat a sandwich after this.
Mm-hmm.
So first off, just a little inside baseball. This is the second time we've done this. We had a recording snafu, so I'm going to be asking some questions that Sig may have already answered.
Hey, I'll just try to be twice as good, right? It'll be all right.
But I'm excited to get into it. And this time we can actually talk a little bit more about the future of Everyday Heroes, because we had a major announcement this week. So I think the first question that I want to ask you this go around is, Everyday Heroes has access to some of the most popular licenses in pop culture, in cinematic history. So which one are you most excited for?
Oh man, which one am I most excited for? I'm always bad at that, but it depends on kind of like what factor. But let's say like Pacific Rim as a game designer is like the most challenging, the most interesting. There may be one, but I have not looked at or read a D20 implementation of a mecha style game, or giant monsters for that matter, like Skull Island. So we're really looking at, I don't know, maybe breaking some new ground, or at least not well-trod ground. And as a game designer, that's pretty exciting, right? And I really want to make it awesome. So I'm pretty excited about that challenge. But I like all those properties. Some I like more than others, but I like them all. They're cool. Many of them I grew up with, right? They're kind of like my teenage
Rambo,
to young adult. Yeah.
Escape from New York. I have to tell you, the internet agrees with you in terms of Pacific Rim. That's the one that everybody went wild over. And I don't think that there has been a official Pacific Rim game before. So
not that I know of.
Yeah, so you are treading new ground with this, which everybody's excited for, like playing in these Jaegers and being drift compatible and everything. It's going to be just so awesome.
I'm going to try to make it as awesome as possible. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
So what's that like when you you go to your desk and your assignment for today is this Hollywood movie that you watched?
Yeah.
That's got to be a little daunting.
It is. I'll tell you, like, during the process, it's not easy to get these movie licenses, right? Dave had to do a lot of deals, and he knows a lot of people. So this is a real challenging thing to put together. And you don't know until the ink is dry on the contract what you're going to get and what you're not going to get. So we did a lot of pitches. We did pitches for all kinds of movies. And so, you're sitting there, I'm designing this Everyday Heroes, which itself was kind of like a storm, in my life. It's like, hey, you want to do this major role-playing game? And I'm like, hell yeah, I do, right? Let's go. Oh my God, And then, we're going to have all these movie licenses. And you're like, seriously? It's like, yeah, I'd like you to write a treatment for Pacific Rim. I'm like, what? Really? Yeah. Okay. And there's, there are many others. I'm not going to talk about the ones we didn't get necessarily, but there were a lot of big movies, right? Like, these were not the only ones we went after. We went after many of them. And I'm like, sometimes, honestly, I'm like, who am I to write a treatment for this? Right. But, you got to do what you got to do. Right. So, folks out there, like, you get an opportunity, you don't say no, you try. Right. That's the way that works. So
when you get that, do you immediately go and rewatch the movies? Because I know it's been some time since I've watched like a couple of these films. And just as an aside, oh man, the Crow is super 90s in the best possible way.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, that was a creature of its time for sure, right? A lot of these are like Universal Soldier and stuff. That's such action, kind of a copycat of Terminator and stuff, right? But it's got Dolph Lundgren and Jean-Claude Van Damme in it, right? And for that reason, when it came out, we were all like, so I think these are really cool creatures of their time. And so, not only is it a great movie source book, but we'll get a little feel of the era that the movies are set into in there. And I think that'll be awesome. So I'm really excited about all of them. Now I've forgotten the question.
No, it was just a matter of like, so I imagine that you have to rewatch these movies.
Oh, right. Yeah, watch them. Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't watch them all. Like, I discovered that Universal Soldier not only has like 4 or 5 films, there were TV series and books and all kinds of stuff, right? And you're going to write this treatment, kind of a pitch for an adventure and everything. And I don't want to get it wrong. So I will tell you, like, watching the movies helps, but what really helps is Wikipedia culture, wiki culture. So, like, I did a treatment for John Wick, and there's a thing called the John Wiki. And let me tell you, the John Wiki's awesome. Like you guys who do that one. And there's wiki material for almost every movie you can imagine. And the fans who put these things together are incredible people. And it just made it a lot easier, right? Because they get all the information in one place. So I do watch the movies to get a sense of the tone and everything. But really, when I'm looking at like plot elements and the world building and stuff, those wikis are actually incredibly helpful. So thank you guys and gals.
So there's a really interesting aspect to this entire cinematic adventures portion of the Everyday Hero system, which is you were speaking about Universal Soldier, which is not exactly a franchise that I've ever really been into, or not really a franchise that I've ever been curious about. However, I am thoroughly excited at the aspect of having cybernetic implants as an option in my game. Yeah. And so that makes me want to crack open that particular cinematic adventure specifically for what it can add to the game, which is a very interesting way to go about adding content to an existing system.
Yeah, I think it's great. And, there's just a lot of creativity, even in a movie you like or you don't like. There's a lot of creativity that goes into the world building and the design and the idea behind it, right? So Universal Soldier is pretty interesting. It's a story about like evil government or evil corporations taking dead military veterans, turning them into cyborg warriors and unleashing them. Yeah, that's what it's about. And unleashing them on different conflicts or in situations where they're not supposed to be used, is I think the original one, right? So it's crazy and it's weird and it's really interesting. And they have these repressed memories and they, can they regain their former personality and fight the programming and the cybernetics, and it's pretty interesting stuff actually. And I think it makes for great role-playing adventures and a really cool story. So yeah, I'm totally excited about all of these properties. I mean, they all have something really interesting going on. And writing the treatments for it was really fun to dive into the lore and learn more about them, to kind of be a hardcore fan instead of a casual fan, which is, I like to sample a little of everything. That's my style, right? From a little A, B, I love the buffet. I tend not to dive too deep into something, but when I'm doing my research on something I'm writing for, I go all the way in, right? Like I'm all in there.
I have to say, I don't know what I expected Universal Soldier to be about, but it was not that. So yeah. I might just pop on Universal Soldier today just to see what that's about, because that's really not at all what I expected. I know another thing that people are excited about is the fact that we do have all these different adventures, all these different worlds, and mixing and matching them. One of the things that we introduce with Kong is these super beasts, like these massive monsters. Yeah. And you can be a monster hunter, which is a class that we introduce in that particular cinematic adventure, or you can punch it with a giant robot, which I think is what everybody's gonna want to do. So, like, what do you think of? What do you think of? When it comes to mixing and matching these different worlds? I mean, you have to design it so that they can mix and match, don't you?
I guess so. There's a bunch of design considerations that go into it, right? You got to make it a fun game. It needs to be fun to play, whatever it is, right? 2, it has to be true to its setting and its lore. We get these licenses. These companies are trusting us to do right by the license, to stay true to its themes and its details, right? So we need to do that. And 3rd, then I think you get into kind of making sure there's at least common threads between the mechanics of the different things. So first and foremost, it needs to serve the property that we're doing, right? But in doing that, I will always be keeping in mind how it can interplay with everything else, because I love interoperability. Now, of course, like, with licenses, we can't say, yeah, we're going to mix these things, right? That's for you, the fan, to do, right? So that's kind of not our job. And in fact, it would be not correct of us to do that, right? Because these are each their own licenses, their own worlds, right? And they deserve to kind of be respected in that terms. But hey, as fans, man, you can do anything you like. I remember in high school, I had this crazy buddy of mine, and he loved to take two properties and mix them together. He's like, we're going to do Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Scooby-Doo. We're going to do Gilligan's Island and Red Dawn, right? I'm just like, all right, buddy.
I know that the hunger for RoboCop versus Terminator was like so real that like ended up making like video games about it and comic books and everything. So that's awesome.
And you get those rare official ones like Alien versus Predator, right? And that's
Freddy
that's
versus
geek
JC.
heaven. Yeah, I love that stuff. So yeah, in your game at home, man, you could do anything you like. And we want to make it possible, right? So we are pretty excited about that. And it's one of the reasons we chose to do it in 5e and D20. It's kind of the most popular game system right now. There's a lot of people working in the space. And that means there's a lot of material that you can, take and cross program. Just because it doesn't have Evil Genius games on it doesn't mean you can't use it, right? So, exactly. I mean, I got my start as a game designer, homebrewing stuff and doing my own conversions and things like that. So, I think that's kind of at the heart of that hobby in many ways. Not everybody's into that, of course, right? But for those who are, it's a big part of it. And so we want to make that certainly in the realm of possibility, right?
Heck yeah. So I now get to officially freak out on one of these designer discussions about the thing that has been so like close to my heart since I've joined up. Highlander. Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
I have to ask. I mean, when it comes to designing an immortal, where do you even start?
Well, we started a few days ago talking about it. Because like I said, until the ink's dry on the contracts and it's announced and everything, there's not a lot we can do. And we're just putting the very finishing touches on Everyday Heroes core book, right? So we got to keep my mind on the mission and get that all polished up. But you were starting to talk about it because we're just both, me and Goober, just kind of excited about the prospect. So we had a little powwow yesterday, and we were like, okay, like this Friday, we got to talk to Dave about exactly who's doing what and when we're going to start and all that jazz. So we got all our ideas brewing already, and we're going back and forth. I think, the thing is, we're going to come up with a bunch of ideas. We won't just have one, and then we're going to boil them down and see which ones work best, right?
Right.
But we were talking about it, an immortal. I mean, you just inherently have some advantages that a normal person doesn't. So, it's not like you're going to balance being unkillable with a regular everyday heroes person, right? Like that's just not exactly going to happen. On the other hand, being an immortal doesn't give you super strength, or it can a little bit, but like it's not straight up a superhero power. So it'll probably work out okay balance wise with the system. I won't need to make too many adjustments for them. But there's just going to be this thing. Well, yeah, if you're an immortal, like you don't die except under very specific circumstances. So that just is how it is.
Very specific circumstances.
Yeah. So if you want to play a Highlander immortal in a game that doesn't have Highlander immortals, you're going to have this advantage versus everybody else. I don't think there's any way we get around that. It's just part of the setting. So
I think that's just so cool. I think that's just so cool.
Yeah, but we're going to dive into all the details, find out exactly how it works in the shows. And of course, like there will be some contradictions. There always are in movies and shows, right? Mm-hmm. And we'll have to work with the license holders to pick a direction and make sure that what we're doing syncs up with what their vision is. So it'll be really cool, but I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be fun. And I think it just, the thing that it really opens up mechanically, the fact that you don't die, there's just really a couple changes to the system because, they can be beaten, right? They can be knocked down and incapacitated like a normal person, but they just aren't going to die from that. So no death saving throws, obviously, right? If you're a Highlander, that's just not part of the picture. But it does open up story possibilities, right? And that's what the shows are about too. Like if you're immortal, there's some things you can do that other people can't do. And it just opens up, dramatic possibilities that are very different. And I'm excited about those role-playing aspects, right? So what kind of
yeah.
stories can you tell from a heroic perspective for characters who mostly can't die?
That's so how soon into, taking on the job of lead designer for Everyday Heroes did you realize just the scope of what you'd be doing?
Well, I knew right from the get-go that the game was going to involve licensed movie properties, just didn't know which ones, right? And
Right.
so like my initial pitch to Dave actually was a little far from his vision. He pitched to me this thing about movies, and I pitched a game that was very cinematic based, like like you had a director and the
Mm-hmm.
players were kind of actors playing characters, and you would have scenes and things. And he's like, that's not what I want, Sig. I got to find somebody who understands my vision. I'm like, hey, hold up, bro. Like, I want to match your vision. Like, so that's what I thought you wanted. Let me try something else. And then he's like, oh yeah, no, that's really good. And so, yeah, it goes from there. So I was excited, but you never know when you get a new project. I didn't know Dave personally. And so, there's a period of time where you get to know somebody and you're like, are they legit? Are they for real? Are they a nice person? Are they a crazy person? You don't know when you first start. Am I going to get paid? Well, turns out Dave's a really good guy. And yes, I get paid. So it was a good relationship going forward. And, it's been really exciting working with him. And yeah, this thing's like a rocket ship, right? Like,
I
just
don't know when you
start.
Believe it. I almost didn't believe it. When, like, there's no way, Pacific Rim and Highlander all in the same system. You're out of your mind. And then, and then it just happens one day. You're like, oh,
yeah. And it's a good thing. I think, when you're building a team, you need different types of people. Like everybody who thinks the same is not a good team. And so, Dave is a guy with incredible ambition, and he just hits the ground running, and he knows where he's going, and he goes at it hard. Right. And that's great. And my weakness is I don't have a lot of ambition, right? I'm a go with the flow. And the strengths I bring to something are kind of a pragmatism and a practicality, right? I'm like, all right, that's where you want to go. Okay, let me figure out how we can get there, right? I've got it planned out, and here's what we do. So that's kind of my shtick, right? And kind of the stable center of things a little bit. And yeah, it's been a great team. And Goober, likewise, he's a great rules technician, and he's just really nice to work with. And everybody's great to work with, right? We have our differences, but we always work them out really amicably. And when two of the three of us are like, no, it has to be like this, the other one will be like, okay, it'll be like that, right? So we may disagree a little bit, but we all commit together to get things done.
Yeah, and it's been wild watching you and Goober just kind of go back to back on this thing. Like you two are developing worlds now. It's not. I mean, I think it's challenging enough to just put together a core rule book for a system. For D20 Modern. I mean, we take a look at our Making D20 Modern series, and you can see the amount of work that went into it. And it's you and Goober recreating and then expanding and adding worlds to it. I mean, how I guess the question is like, how do you do it, man? Like, I mean, it's got to be a little overwhelming,
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, different people have different strengths, right? One of my strengths is you can throw anything at me and I'll be like, yeah, okay, what do I do about that? So like I have an even temperament. And Dave found me at the right time. Last year I had leukemia, and so I just took a year out of life basically to survive that. And once again, like maybe that should have been a super traumatic thing for me, but it was kind of like, it was really hard. Like, I'm not saying it was as a cakewalk, but it was just another thing in life I got to deal with. And I come off of that and I've got a wide open plate, right? Because my whole life just went away. And this opportunity comes, and I've always loved to make games, and I have made some games professionally, but I've usually had a day job, a regular job, and I didn't have anything. And he's like, you want to do this? And I've got all the time in the world, and I got all the motivation in the world, right? Because you have kind of a near-death experience, and you're like, man, I got to live life to the fullest. I mean, I tried to do that before anyway, but it just reinforces that belief. And so I'm like, yeah, going for it. Let's just do it 100%. So other than playing a few video games, because you want to keep your head in the play, like you want to be a player as a designer. I think it's a mistake when you stop playing your games and you don't have, like if you just go all in on your business. So I take breaks to play and play with my friends and talk to people. But other than that, man, I game design for the last 4 months. That's all I do is I write and I edit and I test and that's it. I love it. Right. Frankly, it's awesome. I'd like to keep doing that for a while. So, so that's part of it. I mean, it's just having the time and having the focus to just crank and just work. It's fun work though, right? So I love it. And Goober is, he's just a great partner to work with. I didn't know him at all before this, and I was like, oh boy, this could be terrible. It could be great. Who knows? What, his name is Goober? That's what he likes to be called? Oh my gosh. What am I dealing with? But man, the guy is great. He's a great designer and he's just a great guy. I love working with Goober. Just fantastic. So it's good times, man. I'm just a happy camper.
I mean, that is awesome. I mean, now we've gotten to the point where we've had hundreds of play tests, and now actual plays are starting to come out, and so you're seeing people in the wild play your game. That's got to be a good feeling.
It's an incredibly good feeling. It's so satisfying to watch people have fun, right? Like, when it comes to motivation, like I do like attention and the limelight, but really what I like most is to serve people, to entertain people, right? Like I did acting in school and stuff. I just love to give people good feelings, right? However I'm doing it. And so to watch people have fun with the thing and get creative, add their own elements, so good. And like your Gen Con live play. What's the lady's name who plays the hacker?
That's Anita. That's
Anita. Anita plays her character so well. Like she uses the powers of the hacker in such great ways. I mean, it's exactly kind of how I envisioned that character. I made those, I helped build the PCs for that game. And I'm just like, okay, here's my vision. And I'm going to give them this. Well, I hope they read this stuff. And I hope she just knocked it out of the park. And all the people there do great with their characters. The guy playing Mac is awesome too. Everybody's really cool. And you, of course. I really like your take on the character too, so, but I love watching you guys. It's just so fun to see that stuff that you wrote and you're like, I hope people like it. And you guys are just bringing it to life and makes me happy.
I gotta tell you, like when we were putting that together and people picked who they were playing, everybody thought that the hacker was like not going to be able to do well. Like they were just like, we're in the middle of a jungle here, like this is like guerrilla warfare. What can the hacker do? And they're doing a lot.
They wreak havoc. Yeah.
I mean, but it makes sense because in this day and age, there is no place that you could go where technology isn't. So I think that was a fantastic showcase. Like if the bad guy has a phone, I can screw with him.
You got an in. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, and it just it embodies that idea of the hacker so well. I think so. It's great. I got to design that class. Goober did most of the classes, but I did that one. And I just had fun. And it was a real challenge. I'm like, what is this person going to do in a fight? Like, what are they going to do? They're a hacker, but as I worked it through and you sit down with the problem and you come up with ideas, I started to see, the outlines of what could happen. And because I knew this character was going to a jungle island, some of the traditional hacking things that we had weren't going to be that useful. So I tried to pick from the stuff something that would really work in that environment. So I was really happy. And it was amusing to me to see the game master a couple times like, that system's not connected to anything. You can't, that one, no. Because otherwise that hacker is just going to like break every plot,
Every single one of them.
It's a powerful archetype. And I think it's great. Though. Yeah, I mean, it's not a character who's just all about damage, but they have a lot of story power. And I was really excited with the genius heroes, the smart heroes, to give them story power, right? As opposed to just combat power.
I mean, they're just very useful in a way that you don't think about. Like in the middle of a firefight, somebody's phone's going off, and then they look at it, and then it explodes. Like it's just very creative and interesting stuff. So that particular class, we're having a blast seeing showcase. I know. I know that we have a few other actual plays that are going into a more paranormal type vibe. So the Gen Con AP is more, like I almost want to say A-Team Charlie's Angels type beat.
Yeah, for sure.
But we have another one that's going more like X-Files. And I mean, to make a system that can kind of stretch in those directions it's a hell of a thing. So I mean, kudos to you and Goober, because that's been really, really cool.
Yeah, well, something I learned as well, because I'm running my own. I got to start my own game finally of Everyday Heroes with my kind of usual crew, which involves like Jeff Grubb and Stan and some of the other people that work on the game. And it's about Canadian Secret Service agents, the CSIS, although it's kind of this fictional branch, the Special Covert Action Team that doesn't exist. And it's got a little bit of an X-Files twist. So like the first 2 episodes were like very standard real world surveillance of a Chinese diplomat, right? And they're setting up tails, and they're switching guys, and they've got cameras placed, and they're monitoring and trying to figure out how to get into the embassy and stuff. And then, they're told the guy has some sort of crypto in a briefcase or something. But then they go up north, and the guy travels out into the boonies in Canada, and it turns out he's actually going to a cryptozoological convention, right? He's really interested in Bigfoot. And they go out on this expedition, to go sort of survey and look for Bigfoot, because what are you going to do at a Bigfoot con in the wilderness of Canada, right? You're going to go look for him. And while they're out there, the diplomat's party, he won a contest to be with this real world famous Bigfoot author. And they get ambushed by crazy guys in the woods dressed like a bear, and everything just goes pear-shaped, right? And it just gets real weird and real violent real fast. Yeah. And the real world is just such a rich setting, right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. It's like the world we live in is full of adventure opportunities, right? And there have been plenty of games that explore that. But this is the first one I've worked on that explores that. And the first time I've done a lot of modern world role playing. And it's in the age we live in, man, it is a good time. You can go. So when we were talking about the Chinese embassy in Vancouver, we can go look at pictures of it, right?
Yeah.
So, they're like, what's the compound? I don't need somebody to draw a map for me. I just go to Google Maps and Google Earth, and we can look at the thing, right? And get street views from it. And what's the neighborhood around it like? I've got a source book that is an entire city, an entire planet, right? and I can use every piece of it in my game.
Your right? FBI agent is so concerned.
It's just, to me, it's incredible. And, just hadn't dawned on me until I started playing it. And I'm like, man, this is fun. This is just really cool. And people's reaction to it has been sort of like, yeah, like this has always been here, but we just weren't tapping into it,
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, you're talking about just the breadth of what you can do in the modern day setting. I know that I'm currently, for the actual play that we're doing on Critical Misses, I'm making it more Fast and Furious Ocean 11 themed. Mm-hmm. And another channel that we're working with is basically going to they're writing a Twin Peaks style adventure.
Nice.
And it's just, it's fun to see what people can do with their own imagination and the tools that we present in the core rule book. And then on top of that, we're going out and finding a lot of these properties that people already love. So, we're doing Fast and Furious and Ocean's 11. If I wanted to do something that was like The Crow, I don't have to do something like The Crow. We actually have that. And the plan is to keep expanding that as people show interest. So eventually, who knows what we'll have access to. And I think that's so incredibly cool. I mean, because half the fun of this stuff is creating it on your own. Anyway, and to be able to pick and choose from an official source book is just very exciting to me.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I mean, not that we're the first to ever kind of do this approach. Sometimes game historians are, well, so and so has done this. I'm like, yeah, that's great, right? I'm not claiming to be the great innovator, but I'm having a ton of fun with it, and I hope a lot of other people do too, right? So, but yeah, I love the fact that the core book, and I'm a toolsmith, right? Is the way I see it. I am not making the game you have to play. I'm making the tools for you to play the game you want to play, right? So. I try to make it modular and flexible so that people can really let their imaginations run and add stuff on. And where we could in the book, we say, this is how we designed this, right? So for the backgrounds and professions, we tell you exactly how to balance them the way we balance them. Some of which is very obvious anyway, but some of which is a little not. With classes, it's a little too complex to do that. We don't have a hard formula that same way, right? Because you got to have more creativity. But you can look at them and get the general idea. And so I think people can add to this game really well. And, I know people have asked me, are we open to third-party people linking up to our game? Yeah, absolutely, right? Especially if you're going to bring your own world building and use our rules. Yeah, 100%, man. I would love to see that. And I think that's just going to enrich stuff for everybody. So I think that'll be great. Got to talk to Dave about using the name and the trademarks and everything, of course, right? Like that has to get worked out, right? But,
he's the business guy.
yeah. But but he's open to that idea, right? And he wants to have people do that. So so we're really open. And so we're going to present, we've got a toolbox in the core game that lets you build kind of anything you want. It's got a setting in it, which is the modern day, which I think is incredibly flexible, right? But it supports other things. And we've got some monsters in there from science fiction and from fantasy so that you can kind of mix it up a little bit right out of the box. But then, we're going to have these worlds based on films, and we'll have adventures for them and rules for them so that you can expand off in those directions. Plus, you can totally bring your homebrew modern day fantasy or urban fantasy or anything you like, right? And connect it up here. And hopefully it's a fun, easy to adapt rule system that makes for quick play. But also, because in my heart, I also like the play of the game. So combat has like good tactics and strategy available in it. But how much of that you want to use is up to you and your players, right? So the game can be played incredibly simply. Roll a d20, hit a number, succeed, go lower, fail. And it's not just binary. Like in our game master section, which is quite extensive, we talk about, you don't have to just sort of say, oh yeah, if you fail, it's always just failure. Like you didn't pick the lock. Maybe you could pick the lock even if you fail, but there are repercussions to what happened. Like you left evidence or you broke. The game master has a lot of flexibility in this system to interpret the rules in a way that makes sense for Melu and their storytelling style. Right. So, and we try to lay out all the different ways you can approach things. We have a lot of optional rules to give different feelings to the mechanics. So we really want this to be open and inclusive, right? In many different respects, in play style, in mechanics, and in representation, and the art and everything. So it's great to be able to have that kind of influence on a game and have my philosophies be part of it, right? It's not just mine, of course. Dave's philosophy is in there, Goober's is in there, Jeff Grubbs is in there. Everybody's had a go at it, but still to have as much input as I've had is kind of a dream come true. So
I mean, one of the things that you brushed up on that I love to hear a little bit more about is the baddies, the monsters and creatures and people that we're going to be fighting in this. What was your approach to? We're working in the modern world, so it's just what was the guiding principle behind that?
Well, to give credit where credit's due, Goober is the NPC deity, right? He's the person who just created almost all the NPCs in her book, did the stat blocks for them, did the guidance. We looked at the stuff I'll throw a little shade, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and we were like, what? That doesn't seem right at all. And so I'm like, now look, we need to give people really good guidance on building NPCs. Like, so Goober, take all your knowledge and codify it, right? So that other people can attain your mastery, right? So we put that together. I only had a bit of input. I was like, well, I really want to see us define the roles for the NPCs. So as a game master, because for me, I always loosely followed guidelines on CR and stuff because I know my players pretty well. I know what they can handle. And sometimes you want to fight where you go in a tough guy who soaks damage and he's just like, how can we take the guy down? He's unstoppable, right? And other times you want baddies that are, like a dime a dozen. They're dangerous. You don't want to get hit by those guys, but you shoot them once so they go down. It depends on the genre. It depends on the scene, right? So I was like, please give me guys and tag them with these kind of traits so that a game master is like, I want a real spiky, dangerous feeling encounter, but one that won't last very long, right? So I'm going to take these kind of guys. Or I want a boss guy, and so I know these are kind of good boss guys that are going to be the center of a group and support their minions and stuff, right? So that was really important to me as a game master. So I approach the NPCs as a game master. Here's what I want. Goober, you're the expert. Give me that, right? And he put, his own creativity. His monsters are really great, and they follow what I love in a monster. Is just like it has all of them have a gimmick. Like, so every NPC has a shtick, kind of, right? A thing it's going to do in combat. They usually live for about 4 turns on average, right? Like that's, 5e combat's 3 to 6 turns, right? So they don't get a lot of time. So if they do 1 or 2 shticks, that's all you really need. You just want those shticks to be good and fun. And these are great. They all have that. So there are demons. They got robots. There's a lot of famous movie monsters with the serial numbers filed off in there. Which sometimes I don't like, but because we're just, having a pastiche and we're a movie themed game, hey, yeah, you can play guess which monsters from which movie. It's pretty easy to play. But they're in there, and they have a little bit more generic name, of course, but but they're cool.
Do have to say,
they're fun on their own.
Combat feels really good in this system. It's a lot snappier. If that's not, that might not be the best word, but it's really fluid, and it's easy to keep the story going in the midst of combat, which I think is something that in base D&D you can lose, where it's just like, okay, we're going through the minutia of our phases of our rounds. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the numbers sometimes in 5e combat. I mean, it is simplified from say like 3-5 D20, which was really a tactician's dream game in some ways, right? I wanted to keep some of that. Like, so we have some real strategic elements in the covering fire or suppressive fire, I should say, where like you want to pin down enemies with an automatic weapon or, spray a room so everybody just clears out of the place. So there's a lot of tools to kind of be strategic in combat, and a lot of the powers, some of them play with the mechanics of the system, but they always do it in a way that feels like it has a real world analog. The hacker and their cell phone. I wanted to give them something they could do every round in combat, even though they're not a shooty kind of a character, right? And so, playing with people's cell phones was right there, and it distracts somebody. It takes away the reaction. You take away the reaction. Well, now it's a lot easier to maybe get them with a grenade or use covering fire against them. So you could get really strategic in this game, but it's also just fun to come up with a silly ringtone that the poor schmuck has on his phone, right? And embarrass him during combat, right? So doing this double duty of it's fun and colorful, it feels flavorful, but it's also got a mechanical core for combat that you can play around with and enjoy the tactics of is my sweet spot, right? Because as a game master, I'm a big storyteller. As a player, I love tactics. So I want to make sure both are available, right? And baked into every piece of it. But I know some people don't want to play with a lot of those kind of fiddly combat stuff. And we made the game so you don't have to do a lot of that either. And, if you forget a rule, like I'll watch some of the live plays and people are like, oh, you get a bonus attack, and it doesn't matter, right? Like they're having fun. They're beating up the bad guys. Who cares, right? If you did every last little combat thing you can do. But if that's you and you really love that stuff, it's in there. So, so play it how you like it.
I just for the record, the really embarrassing ringtone in our game was like Britney Spears "Toxic." This random gorilla has just all his Britney Spears stuff. Oh, that's good. We are partnered with Roll20, and so we're gonna be running a couple of games with them, using obviously their using the maps and minis and everything. And I've had the chance to play this with, on Roll20 using minis and everything. It plays very well. Like, I know that there are some fifth edition games that, are more built around theater of the mind. And so that they don't translate too terribly well to an actual map with minis. But this one does, especially with the covering system being so simplified.
Yeah, it's interesting. In some ways, some of our mechanics are so easy, they're confusing in the sense, like, Dave is a great playtester, and that, Dave is not a technical player, and so he'll be like, Sig, I don't get, like, how does this work? Is it like a cone? Is there what's the distance on it? I'm like, no, man, you just draw a line from your character to two places on the map, and that's the area, right? Like, that's it. Anybody standing in there gets hit with bullets, right? That's how that works. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So, it's 5e is designed theater of the mind. Like, that's its default format. And personally, I love it because it makes it easy to play. Like, I play couch D&D. We all sit on the couch, we chillax, and we talk about what's happening, right? But I've played map D&D. I played 4th edition, right? You better have a map for that.
Oh yeah,
right. And so I can get into it. And I love BattleTech. I love map, grid hex games. So I try to think of both when I'm writing the rules. I lean towards theater of the mind because it's my own game master style, and that's the 5e default. But we try to provide enough guidance that people can do precision on the maps. And, we use, 5 foot, that's 1 square generally. So it's pretty easy conversion. We have a little bit in there, like, here's how we intend these things to be converted. So, yeah. And I think, though, 5, D&D lends itself to that too. It plays pretty well on a map if you want to. But you can, when you're designing a rule, you need to think about, like, how are people going to use this in real play? And because digital is getting more and more common, we're leaning back in the map direction again, not because we want to enforce super crunchiness like you did with 4E, but just because that's the medium that we're playing in a lot these days, right? And the computer is like, I don't understand your theater of the mind, right? So you got to give it something concrete to work with. So, and it's a good tactical game, though. I will say, like, if you want to play our game just as a tactical combat game, totally you could do that. I'd say play around 3rd level or so. And it's a real strategic, fun game for just pure, combat fun and tactics with the gunplay and stuff.
Like I said, I love the covering system in Everyday Heroes. It just raises your AC. So, I mean, it's very just very crisp.
Yeah, it's good. If you're hiding behind a wall, it doesn't matter, like, how agile you are particularly, right? Like,
right.
It's a wall. You're a much smaller target, right? That's what's going on. Yeah, and that's actually one of Dave's design contributions, right? He's like, cover has to be really important with guns. I'm like, I agree with that. He's like, here's how I want it to be. And Goober and I, we helped refine that a little bit. He told us what he wanted, and we came up with. He was very influential in the cover system. So, Dave has his design chops. He's usually busy with marketing. He wants to really be involved. He rarely has the time. So, poor guy.
I feel that. My next question, and this is one that we got from the socials with the announcement, which is that Everyday Heroes starts off with characters being from level 1 to level 10. Is that true for the classes presented in the cinematic adventures as well?
Yeah, probably. It's going to depend on the property. So if for some reason, if we land a superhero movie, then not going to be Marvel. They have their own game, right? But if we got a superhero property, there's lots of them out there. We might well go to 20 for that property, right? Because one of the reasons we went to 10 is our setting is the modern day. Modern day heroes don't become godlike beings, right? Which tends to be what like level 20 in Dungeons and Dragons feels like.
Yeah.
And but a superhero does, right? So if the property says this is a game where level 20 makes a lot of sense, we'd probably do level 20. For everyday heroes for the core book, it just doesn't make much sense. And it has other design advantages. It lets us make twice as many classes. When you consider the playtesting challenges, right, of doing a class out to 20 and doing a class out to 10, it really is about half as hard, maybe only 60% or something, right? But it's a lot easier. So we can do a lot more classes. We can have a lot wider variety by going a little less deep. And yet I still like 10th level in Everyday Hero still feels like a very powerful person. You feel like a total badass, right? That could just crush fools, right?
Especially with our multi-classing. It's just,
yeah, you can really just go crazy and have some pretty outrageous characters, right? If you want to, if you want it to be pretty broad action, you go to high level and it's great. If you want to keep it, like, I would say if you're trying to go for gritty realism, man, don't go past level 4, maybe, right? Like, if you want that game to feel like you could die at any time or something, because the hit points go up. So keep it, a little lower level. So, and we give that game master advice. This isn't a game where you have to be a campaign and I start at level 1 and I go to level 10. It's not really like that. It can be like that. You can totally play that way, but you can also be like, for this adventure, this is a very high level, super save the world challenge, level 10 characters, right? This is kind of in the middle somewhere. It's heroic. They're pretty wild characters. Like you guys are doing level 5, which feels pretty powerful, right? Is pretty dynamic and exciting, but you can also just scale it down and, like we're grunts on the battlefield at Normandy and you play level 1, man, don't get shot because it's not going to be good. And you can do that. So by using the level, and we talk about that in the Dungeon Master or Game Master section, we talk about how you can use level as a storytelling mechanic and stuff like that. So, yeah. I always end up wandering off the question. But yeah, you're good. So we may do it for some of the games. For the ones that are on slate, I'm not sure. Maybe Highlander, possibly, but I don't think it'll be necessary. So we'll see. You could do a lot with 10 levels. I think sometimes 20 is just too much. Makes sense in Dungeons and Dragons. Makes sense in some settings, right? Superheroes, I think.
I mean, even there, some classes kind of lose their luster after around level 14, so.
Yeah, and just not a lot of people play up at those high levels. It's a pretty rare thing. It happens. People have campaigns that go on 10 years. That definitely happens. And sometimes we're going to play level 17 characters. Or I used to do tournaments, make a level 20 character, be as broken as you can and see who wins, right? I love that stuff, right? That's super fun. But that tends to be what high level play tends to break down into, instead of most people are not doing that, right? They're going 1 to 7 usually. Maybe 13 is a longer campaign.
Yeah.
So I think it was a good compromise. But yeah, we're not married to it. It's we did it for the purpose of the game. Everything we do is because it makes the game better, or it gives us more benefits than the drawbacks, right? So
yeah. So I mean, another question to ask, just kind of looking into like just how much goes into creating these cinematic adventures. I mean, with new classes must also come new feats, I'm assuming. So that's, I mean, you're our feats guy. So like, how's that been? Like just planning it out.
Super fun, right? So like, immediately one of the first things I'm like, I want to make feats core, right? Feats are not optional. And everyone was like, yes, of course. So I'm like, yeah, all right. Step 1 achieved, right? And then, I used to run a thing called the Netbook of Feats, and it was for, started in 3.0, and it was, third-party feats, and we publish everybody's work together in the OGL, just a huge source book for game masters. But we tried to edit them in a mostly professional fashion to have a really good quality product. But we religiously followed the precedent set by Wizards of the Coast. But this is my own game, and I don't have to follow religiously those tenets. So I get to go, I've spent the last 10 years working on Feats. I have a few ideas about how they could be better. And Goober had a great idea too. He's like, in 5th edition, you get this like +1 wisdom, and then you get a little ability. And he's like, sometimes you want the wisdom, sometimes you don't. You have 20 wisdom already. You're wasting half the feat. So we're like, yeah, let's break those up. And so we have 2 kinds of feats. We've got minor feats and major feats. Major feats are more powerful. They've got a lot of mechanics in them. It's like a class ability or 2 class abilities put together, kind of equivalent. Ooh. And then we've got minor feats, which are little ones, and you get to take 2 of those if you want to take the minor ones. So you can mix and match. And one of the feats is I get +1 to an ability score. So you could take any of your +1s at any time. You get feats every other level. You get two minors or 1 major, and it just opens up a big door of creativity. And then we're like, multi-classing. Man, our classes are front loaded. Like, so at level 1, you get a lot of abilities, you get a lot of flavor, right? You're not a one-trick pony. We want you to feel interesting right from the get-go. But that means like old school 5e multi-classing. Yeah, I'll just take level 1 of everything, man, because I get so much stuff, right? Like, it would be awesome. Nah, it's not so good. So we have a feat-based multi-classing system. So they're major feats. So you take them, and the way we work is we have a archetype like strong hero, fast hero, smart hero, wise hero, etc. We've got the 6 ability scores. We've got these 6 archetypes. And then sitting on that are the classes, which have all the really cool detailed abilities, right? And the feats are kind of the same. So you can take, let's say I'm a smart hero, but I want to be good at Kung Fu, right? I'm a genius and I'm a Kung Fu master. Great. So at level 2, you can go take agile hero, right? And so I'm building up. I've got my, got my agile. I'm quick on my feet and everything now. At level 4, you could go take martial artist, and you're going to get kind of the equivalent of the first, say, 3 levels of the martial artist class. There's usually like 1 thing you're not getting because it would kind of unbalance the game if you got it. Every all the combat classes have some kind of damage increasing stuff.
Yeah.
And you'll get a little bit of that by multi-classing, but not too much. You get enough. You get the parts that will make you good in combat, but not the parts that make you extra good compared to everybody else. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the smart hero goes into martial artist. They'll be almost as good as a martial artist, but not quite have that extra damage reach, right? As where another character is, let's say like your sharpshooter wants to also be good at Kung Fu, you can do that too. You're not really going to be able to add the Kung Fu onto the weapon power, right? And like, oh, I'm crazy. You'll just be good at both now, right? So you make all these choices. Yeah, you can mix. Every class has got multi-class feats, so you can multi-class from any class and any other class. And there's enough feats. If you went crazy, you could get 2 other classes worth of multi-class feats. Nobody ever gets like the top level thing, right, from each class. That's kind of reserved and special, right? But you get most of all the stuff in the middle. So it really, like, there's no way to screw it up. Like in the other one, you're like, I don't have a base attack bonus, or I've totally messed up my saving throws, or I've, but the spells aren't compatible with 2 spell casting classes. We don't have any of those problems, right? Because you take the feat gives you everything you need to be good at the thing. But not too good, right?
Yeah, it feels like you're not being punished for multi-classing, which is a nice change of pace.
Yeah, and you're not being punished for not multi-classing. You totally don't need to do it. You just do it because it's fun. And can you build some killer combos? We try to make them not too killer, but there are ones in there. I'm like, I want to reward people who are very clever. So there's some neat combinations. Like taking feats, some of the, many feats are not multi-class feats, they're just feats. And you take these and you take that, and you could do this with that class. And so I had like a brute with a jetpack, like it's one of the engineer genius tricks. The brute's like a big, like, I like to punch stuff. So he's just like, you almost feel like a superhero at that point. It's a pretty high level character, but you smash through the wall, flying on your jetpack, grapple somebody, take them up above the river, and throw them in, right?
I gotta say, with the character I'm playing in Gen Con is Antonio Sanchez, who is a marksman who has a charismatic hero feat.
Yeah.
So he's deadly with the gun, but like if he has to talk his way out of something, he can, which felt like I did it once. It felt very Hollywood. It felt like this is a movie character. So yeah, I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, super fun. So yeah, so long as I have a say in these things, every class will come with 3 feats. or 2 to 3 feats. If it has an archetype, that comes with 1 feat. If it has a class, that comes with 2 feats. And that's part of the design, right? So, and I designed the classes partly with the feats in mind and the feats with the classes in mind. The class kind of comes first, but every once in a while I make adjustments so that the feat works, right? Because I want it to be accessible. I want that multi-class thing to feel like you're getting the core elements of that class, right?
Yeah.
But we do have to noodle, because I'm like, well, I can't give them that because then these guys take it and it's all done, right? Like, and it's all broken. So it's a tough balancing act. It's one of the more, I got a big spreadsheet and I crunch all the numbers, right?
I mean, you know, and every time you talk about this stuff, I just think about the cinematic adventures, which exponentially adds more complexity to what you're already got going on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. As any game gets bigger, a leak or two may spring. We shall see. But I'll try to keep them out, right? Yeah.
But I am thoroughly excited for everything that we've got coming up. So, I mean, now that we've got the cinematic announcements out, people have kind of been able to get a glimpse of what's going on with a few of the actual plays. What are you most excited about for people to get their hands on? Like, what are you, once this Kickstarter goes and people have the book in their hands, what are you excited for them to try out?
Everything. Like, here's the thing, like, it's the old trope. Don't tell me about your character, right? Like somebody, I have a level 20 warlock who, and the guy, tell me about your character. I want to hear about it, right? I will be delighted. You tell me about their backstory. Tell me about how you use their abilities. I want to know. I mean, maybe I'm really busy and I got to run or something, but if I got the time, I want to hear about it. I want to hear about your campaign. I want to hear about it. So, like, yeah, and I don't know if you see me, like, I'm hands-on. Like, when we do an announcement over on Eden World and people are chatting, like, I jump over in there. I'm like, hey, you got questions? Like, I'll answer them. Like, you tell me, oh, you got criticisms, I'll listen to those too, right? You don't like something, I want to hear about it. So, hey, yeah, like I said, I live for people's enjoyment. So I want to hear how much fun you're having.
Heck yeah. Well, I mean, our Kickstarter goes live the 17th of May. Also, I mean, if you look at Gen Con, a lot of our games are live. So you'll have a chance to play them at Gen Con and see the team. So I'm excited to watch people play this. This is gonna be a good time.
Yeah, and I'm just herding game masters. So come tell me about your character, right? Have a listen.
Save some room for us at your tables. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. But this has been very informative. I am so incredibly excited for this Kickstarter to go live. I can't wait for everybody to get their hands on this. I am freaking out about Highlander. Any last words you'd like to give our audience today here, Sig?
I don't know, man. It's better to burn out than fade away. Is that Highlander? I forget. Like, no, what is it he says? The Kurgan.
Oh no, I think that is.
I think Kurgan. That's him. Yeah. Better to burn out than fade away. Yeah.
I was thinking Highlander 2, which didn't happen, which is ashes to ashes, dust to dust. If you don't draw your sword, it'll surely rust. I am the only person that quotes Highlander 2.
Man, that is a badge of honor, though. That's awesome.
We don't talk about it. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to have you back on another episode with a few other designers so we can get you all talking together. Of course, as always, leave your comments right below so I can see what questions you'd like me to ask them next time. But until then, goodbye, everybody.